Good afternoon, this is Mida, Center Ukraine, Odesa. We are starting our briefing day. Our current guest is Kateryna Chueva, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy. She's online with us. Good afternoon. Could you tell us, please, how do you assess the general losses of the cultural heritage due to the war? 500 days of the full-scale war. When it comes to assessing the situation, the work was started on the first days of the full-scale invasion, and unfortunately, the numbers keep increasing, and we will be able to see the general picture only after the war is over. When the biggest part of the territory of Ukraine is demined. And now, de facto, we can examine those objects that are on the occupied territories and which are quite far from the front line for civilian experts to come there to monitor the situation and to examine all landmarks and to develop the restoration projects in the future. The situation is really difficult. As for damages and losses, the statistics has been also worrisome when it comes to the cultural heritage, the national landmarks, local landmarks. As of the 25th of June, and this is the latest statistics, according to the information provided by Ukrainian regions, at least 664 landmarks have been damaged, not including the cultural infrastructure. We still lack information from the Odesa region and also the Kyiv Municipal Council. So this number could be even bigger. But actually, this number is bigger because this does not include the information about archaeological landmarks in those territories where there is heavy shelling or hostilities, or where we have military units. And of course, we cannot monitor occupied territories. This is a very difficult task. We don't have the direct access to these territories. Those 664 objects include 415 local landmarks and 60 newly identified landmarks. And by the end of every month, we usually update this information. This also includes 12 architecture monuments, 186 construction facilities, and other items. And as of today, when it comes about archaeology, we have information only about 16 sites. And unfortunately, we understand that this is only the small part of all damaged sites. When it comes to types of the monuments, numbers can be different because the same site can be the history, a landmark, or cultural landmark. So we have these numbers to have better understanding, but we do not insist on using it because sometimes it can be confusing. Since the full-scale invasion, since the 24th of February 2022, At least 24 monuments have been destroyed, 423 have been partially damaged, and we still have to clarify the information about 115 signs. And this is about general scale, about the recorded cases of damaged or destroyed cultural heritage sites. When it comes to cultural infrastructure, we have more than 1,400 sites. These are such facilities as libraries, art schools, clubs, theaters, etc., that are located in modern buildings, and this number can be even bigger. And unfortunately, we can already say about significant losses, and unfortunately, the numbers keep increasing. We use all possibilities to record the cases of damage and destruction, but to develop documents for conservation of these sites, we need to examine them on site. Here, we need support of our colleagues from the relevant bodies, from the cities, the local self-government authorities, and international donors supporting such projects. Thank you very much for these details. As for archaeological heritage, does the ministry have now any information about possible works on the site of a former Kakhovka reservoir? We have the experts, and he told us that perhaps there are some illegal activities there. Do you plan any legal work there? Do you have any information about such excavation there? Unfortunately, we have information. Perhaps you know that 2 weeks ago we established the coordination center, Interagency Coordination Center, headed by the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, Alexander Tkachenko. And following the decision of the government, this center shall synchronize activities of all authorities to improve protection of cultural heritage sites on the territories damaged by the explosion at Kakhovka HPP dam. You know that this is a difficult problem. This is the first time the Ukraine faces such a disaster, and we have the territories where we still expect the recovery of water flow. So the territories are washed up, and we do not know about whether this dam will be reconstructed. But now we are facing two problems. These are the territories that we can see on the washed up territories. And unfortunately, now trespassers have access to such sites, those who search for different metals. And they collect items there, but unfortunately they do not always hand over them to museums. And there are other territories that have been damaged by the flood, having effect on the condition of the archaeological sites. And the Academy of Science of Ukraine, local authorities, the cultural heritage inspections, and local experts, universities have united to organize several expeditions on the site. So officially, the work has started there. Those activities are very difficult because we cannot have access to all areas due to the proximity to the front line. So, but when it is possible, our colleagues are there, like in Khortytsa, Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and Loa. Following the current of the Dnieper River, we cannot share details because this can affect the security of the people who are there, as well as the sites. But the work has been started. Fortunately, international donors are ready to support us. As for international donors, Can you share details about cooperation between the Ministry and UNESCO and other international organizations to bring Russia to Dutch justice for the damage and destruction of cultural heritage sites? This is an important topic for Odesa. The Odesa port was damaged today overnight as a result of the attack, and recently it has been excluded from the UNESCO heritage. But the situation on other territories of Ukraine is even worse. So can you share details about such cooperation? The situation is really very difficult, unfortunately. And actually, we hope that UNESCO heritage status will protect Odesa. The port has not been directly excluded from the UNESCO heritage, and it is very difficult for me to word it properly, but following the recommendations of the International Council, the new part of the port that does not have the hard cultural heritage landmarks could have been brought to the so-called buffer zone. But the documents are still under development. No procedures have been introduced for this territory because the territories, the documents are still prepared for the port of the central part of Odesa. We cooperate with UNESCO in this area as well when it comes to other landmarks and sites on the territory of Ukraine. UNESCO is an umbrella organization under the auspices of which big coordination meetings are organized. And there is a range of other international organizations and donors that support preservation of the Ukrainian cultural heritage, and we hope for their support after the end of the war. We can just identified several domains here. This is monitoring and verification of the damaged cultural heritage sites. UNESCO has a special verification center and the whole team that works with the satellite imaging to analyze data that they receive from Ukraine. They also upload this information in their databases, and they're used for the world for different international events. There is also the direct financial support for the whole range of the cultural projects in Ukraine. This mainly covers activities of the civil sector, because there are two areas of work at the level of the state, and which is very the support of the civil society, the relevant organizations, and the support of the development of capacity of institutions. This covers such projects as digitalization of the museum objects. This is the allocation of funds for the damaged institutions like Kiev museums that were damaged by the missile attack last year in Shevchenko Park. And UNESCO also coordinates a whole range of different projects like training sessions for experts who are responsible for dealing with the cultural heritage sites in Ukraine. This is also financial support of conservation and restoration work, including on the UNESCO sites. After the shelling of Lviv, when a lot of local sites were damaged, a lot of houses and a lot of people were left without their homes because they were damaged. And this is the buffer zone of UNESCO heritage sites. And for example, last week, the 3D scanning was conducting of the mentioned sites supported by UNESCO. The situation is really very difficult there. The house in question is in difficult condition after the shelling. And we need to analyze its structures, and we need to take first steps to preserve the house. UNESCO is directly involved in this work. They try to coordinate activities of different donors to the maximum extent possible and to take all possible steps to ensure work in Ukraine to preserve cultural heritage here, to improve our capacity and skills when it comes to management, like crisis management. And this is a difficult situation for our colleagues, even in the home front regions. UNESCO also helps us in restoration processes. For example, UNESCO has joined the assessment of losses conducted by the Ukrainian School of Economy. UNESCO helped with the preliminary calculations. So we can speak about significant cooperation there. UNESCO supports individual persons, individual civil projects, and also coordinates work of different donors, as well as supports big systematic projects. And of course, we continue working on nomination for the cultural heritage sites to be included into the international cultural heritage lists, because we understand the threat. This is obvious because of the Russian aggression. I have a small clarification question now. So the port is still in the UNESCO zone, or it has not been included yet to the UNESCO zone? So what is the status of the port at the moment? As of today, the new map with the excluded port territory from the international UNESCO heritage has not been approved yet. The process is ongoing. And the last question about Scythian gold. Recently, we've gained the court decision about the return of Scythian gold in Ukraine. Can you share some information about what we can expect with regard to return of this cultural heritage to Ukraine, and where will it be stored? This story with the so-called collection of Scythian gold brings us back to the beginning of the open phase of this war, to 2014. Unfortunately, we can see that on the occupied territories like Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, Luhansk regions, unfortunately, show that the policy of Russia is unchanged. And since the 20th century, Russia continues what was started by the Russian Empire. This is appropriation of cultural heritage of Ukraine in different formats. In the 20th century, this was in the form of inviting, so to say, Ukrainian art pieces to exhibition, and then the failure to return them, and also sending such art pieces abroad just to get some revenue as a result of sales of such heritage objects and items. But starting since with 2014, we can see that Russia has taken several steps to include the cultural heritage of Ukraine in its museum holdings. This is true for Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine. And we can also see the illegal movement of different items from the territory of Ukraine to the Russian territory. And the case of Scythian gold shows the importance of the process. In 2014, we were not surprised, but it was difficult for us to give an emotional assessment of what was going on. But now we understand that this is a systematic approach. And this case will be very important for the court practice of the whole world. our colleagues from different countries closely monitor the situation to understand how to analyze materials, how to analyze national and international law, how to organize the process. That's why this victory of Ukraine in this court dispute will be very important for our further work. We'll assess it from the legal and cultural heritage points of view. Now we have a final decision. The part of the collection, the part of the exhibition that was represented in the Van der Pursen Museum, and that included the items from the Crimean museums, like the Central Museum of Tavrida, Kerch Cultural Reserve, and they were the cultural heritage items that were transported from Kiev, from Crimea, after the independence of Ukraine was proclaimed. And these items will be returned to the National Museum of the History of Ukraine. I cannot share the more details about what, where, and how, but we hope that after the return of this collection, Ukrainians will be able to see these items. The process was started in 2014, so it was almost a decade of the intense court struggle involving efforts of Ukrainian professionals and diplomats. And now we need to learn our lessons about the procedure of transporting of collection across the border of Ukraine for international exhibitions during the war, because it will also help us to increase visibility of cultural heritage of Ukraine, and our museum experts will feel better if those items will not be reachable by Russian missiles. This is an important victory for Ukraine with regard to culture and law, and for the next decade, it will help us in our work. I cannot give the specific legal assessment, but as soon as we start our activities to ensure a return of our collections that have been illegally moved from the territory of Ukraine to the occupied territories or to Russia, this victory will be important. Thank you very much for your time, Kateryna. We will be glad to invite you both online and offline. Thank you for the briefing. Thank you too. Keep in touch and take care. Yes, and this is very important now to be safe. That was the briefing of Kateryna Chueva, Deputy Minister of Cultural and Information Policy. Our next briefing will be in half an hour. It will be dedicated to integration of veterans into the peaceful life after they return from the front. Stay tuned.